My name is Ethan, and my obsession with abandoned places has taken me to the darkest corners of forgotten history. But none of them ever called to me like WBYN. The legend of this place, a remote, cold warrior radio station, was more of a whisper than a well-known story, hidden deep in the Appalachian mountains. It was said to have gone silent in the mid-70s, its final broadcast a chilling, unanswered distress call. No one ever knew what happened to its lone operator. The locals simply referred to it as the final transmission to me. It was a siren's call, a perfect piece of content waiting to be unearthed. The hike to the site was brutal. No trails, just dense forest and tangled undergrowth. After hours of navigating with a rusty old map I'd found online, I saw a rusted, unassuming metal door set into the side of a moss-covered hill. The air felt colder here, the silence more profound, a vacuum that seemed to suck the very sound out of the air. It was a perfect, secluded tomb. The door groaned open on rusted hinges, revealing a dark, concrete tunnel that sloped downward. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of damp earth and decayed electronics. My headlamp cut through the darkness, illuminating walls covered in mildew and wires hanging like dead vines. The deeper I went, the more the hum of my own breathing seemed to be swallowed by the oppressive quiet. I finally reached the heart of the bunker. A large, cavernous room was filled with the skeletons of massive, old-school broadcasting equipment, tracks of analog dials, bulky consoles, and a soundproof broadcast booth with a lone microphone frozen in time. A single, dusty control console sat in the middle of the room, its dials and knobs looking like the face of a forgotten machine god. This was it. This was WBYN. I set up my camera, my hands trembling with excitement. The place was a gold mine. I narrated my journey, my awe at the sheer scale of the equipment. As I spoke, I noticed a strange, intermittent flicker on one of the old cathode ray tube screens on the console. It was a flash of static, a brief, ghost-like pulse of electricity. I dismissed it as a power surge from the old, corroded wires. But as I filmed, the flashes became more rhythmic, more deliberate. They pulsed in time with an internal, unseen beat. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. The station wasn't as silent as I'd thought, and I had a feeling that the silence had been deliberately, meticulously maintained. The rhythmic flicker on the old screen grew more insistent, a silent pulse that seemed to demand attention. I cautiously approached the main console, my heart pounding in my chest. The place felt alive, its dormant technology waiting for a spark. The dials on the console began to twitch, just barely, as if a ghost was attempting to tune a frequency. I ran my hand over the dusty surface, a fine layer of soot coming off on my fingertips. The static on the screen flared, and for a split second, I saw a ghostly, distorted face in the Noiser woman's face, her eyes wide with a panicked, silent scream. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. My rational mind screamed that it was a trick of the light, a hallucination brought on by the oppressive atmosphere. but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. A cold, heavy presence in the room. I needed to get out, to process what I had just seen. But a strange, compelling curiosity held me in place. I had to know what was happening. I found a small, hidden metal box wedged beneath the console. It was a logbook, its cover thick with dust and a faint, musty smell. I blew the dust off, revealing the words. Operator's log, station WBYN. The handwriting was a careful, precise script detailing daily transmissions, weather reports, and equipment checks. But as I flipped through the pages, the entries grew more frantic, the handwriting more jagged and panicked. The last few pages were filled with wild, almost indecipherable scrawls. The operator wrote of a new frequency, a signal he couldn't turn off. He called it the static ghost, a broadcast from a place and time that didn't exist. It's a voice, he wrote, and it's not from a radio. It's from somewhere ... else. It tells me things I shouldn't know. It's inside my head. The final entry was a single, chilling sentence. The ghost wants an operator, and I think I'm the one. The log ended abruptly, the final page torn out. My blood ran cold. The man didn't just vanish. He was claimed. He became part of the broadcast, a part of the signal. The air in the bunker grew colder still. The flickering static on the screen grew brighter. Its light now illuminating the control room in an eerie, sickly green glow. The dials on the console began to spin, slowly at first, then faster, on their own. A low hum filled the room, the sound of ancient equipment coming to life for the first time in decades. And then, from the dusty speakers in the broadcast booth, a single, clear sound pierced the silence. A woman's voice, pleading, filled with a profound and bone-chilling terror. "Is anyone there? Can anyone hear me? Please, tell them, ... The voice broke off in a choked sob, swallowed by a wave of static. The broadcast was real, and it was waiting for an answer. The woman's voice, raw with terror, echoed in the silent bunker. My mind reeled. It was impossible. There was no power source, no active antenna, and yet the broadcast was crystal clear, a ghostly signal that had somehow endured for 50 years. The hum of the console intensified, its old vacuum tubes glowing with a strange, unnatural light. The voice returned, now a frantic whisper, a desperate plea. "He's here. He won't let me leave. He's going to make me a part of it." The pronoun he struck a chord of ice in my chest. I looked at the broadcast booth, the single vintage microphone, now seeming to glow with a faint energy. My eyes were drawn to the soundproof glass, and in the reflection, for a split second, a gaunt, ghostly figure stood right behind me, his hand on my shoulder. It was the operator. His eyes were black voids, and his mouth was open in a silent, desperate scream. I spun around, my heart hammering against my ribs, but there was nothing there. Just me, the console, and the voice on the airwaves. The broadcast continued, more frantic now, punctuated by the sounds of muffled struggles and a low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate from the very air itself. The woman was recounting the final hours of her life, her terror as she was trapped inside the bunker. She wasn't just a voice, she was a victim, a part of the final transmission that the operator had warned about. The he was not a man, it was the signal itself, the entity behind the broadcast. It needed a voice, an operator, a conduit, and it had found one in her, just as it had found one in the original operator, and now it had found one in me. A sudden flash of insight, a horrifying realization slammed into me. The operator's log, the torn-out page. He hadn't just vanished. He had found a way to stop it. He had left a clue. I frantically searched the console, my eyes scanning for anything unusual, anything he might have hidden. I found a small, rusted key taped to the underside of the main power switch. On the key, a single faded word was engraved. Lock. My breath hitched. The operator had tried to lock the frequency, to sever the connection, to stop the endless broadcast. But as my hand reached for the key, the hum from the console reached a deafening pitch. The voice on the airwaves twisted, no longer a panicked victim, but a sinister, commanding presence. No, ... don't. You're part of the broadcast now. The ghostly figure of the operator appeared again, this time in the broadcast booth, his face pressed against the glass. He was silent, his eyes screaming a desperate warning. He wasn't a threat. He was a trapped soul, a prisoner of the signal, a victim trying to help me. I had to act fast. The broadcast was reaching its final, terrifying crescendo, and I knew its goal wasn't just to talk. It wanted to take. I snatched the rusted key from beneath the console, my fingers fumbling with the cold metal. The voice from the speakers was no longer a plea. It was a demonic, multi-layered roar, a chaotic symphony of human anguish and static that thundered through the bunker, pressing in on my mind. The ghostly figure in the broadcast booth watched, its silent, frantic movements urging me to hurry. I looked at the key. The word lock was a clue, a last-ditch effort by the original operator to save anyone who might one day stumble upon his grave. But what did it lock? The power switch, the dials, the entire console. A wave of static-filled paranoia washed over me. I felt the presence of the broadcast, a hungry, cold weight in the room, watching my every move. It knew what the key was for. It wanted to stop me. As I hesitated, the hum from the console intensified, and the old equipment began to fail. Lights flickered and died. Dials spun wildly. The air filled with the sharp scent of ozone and burnt wires. I looked into the main broadcast booth, and the operator's ghost was no longer just a projection. His form was now semi-solid, his face contorted in a silent scream, his hands desperately pounding on the soundproof glass. He was trying to get through, to warn me. He was a prisoner, and the broadcast was his cell. He was trying to tell me something, and the voice on the airwaves was trying to silence him. I focused on the key, and then on the logbook, the torn page. What was on that page? What did it say? The operator had written about the signal, the frequency, and the key. The final entry ended with "it needs an operator." The broadcast wasn't just a recording. It was a parasitic entity that needed a living host, a living voice, to continue its transmission. The woman was its last victim, the operator its first. I was its next. A wave of insight, a chilling whisper from the ghost of the operator filled my mind. The microphone, the broadcast, ... the final transmission. It wasn't about the key, it was about the frequency. The key was to lock the frequency, to lock the signal into its final transmission. The torn page, I realized, wasn't a warning. It was a schematic, a diagram showing the right sequence of dials to lock the frequency, to sever the connection for good. He had torn it out so no one else would accidentally set the sequence and unleash the signal again. But he had left the key as a last resort, a secret for the one who was meant to find it. But the key wasn't just a key. It was also a power source, a small, strange, corroded battery, the final piece of the puzzle. I had to use the key to activate the console and set the dials to the right frequency. But I had no idea what that frequency was. The broadcast was getting closer, more aggressive. The hum in the room became a piercing, high-pitched whine. The ghostly figures of the operator and the woman began to coalesce, their forms blending into a single, twisted echo of a screaming soul. The broadcast was reaching its final, terrifying phase, and I knew that if I didn't find the right frequency, I would become the ghost on the airwaves. The screaming in the room was deafening, a psychic assault of static and human anguish that threatened to tear my mind apart. The forms of the operator and the woman swirled in the broadcast booth, their faces merging, their silent screams. Now a single, horrific image of pure terror. The console's vacuum tubes glowed with a sickening, vibrant light, and the dials spun wildly, a chaotic dance of a machine gone mad. The voice on the airwaves, a cacophony of 1,000 tormented souls, shrieked, "Join us." I knew I had to act. I had the key. I had to find the right frequency. But what was it? My mind raced, trying to recall every detail of the logbook. He had written about the signal, the static ghost, the broadcast from the past. A single, chilling thought, a whisper that wasn't my own, echoed in my mind. It was the operator's last, desperate thought, a fragment of his consciousness that lingered in the bunker. The final transmission isn't a broadcast, it's the final entry, the torn page. It wasn't about a broadcast, it was about a time. The time of the final transmission. The date the station went silent. 1974. The precise moment. 11:59 p.m. That was the frequency. That was the key to the lock. The time, the date, was not just a record of failure. It was a way to sever the connection, to lock the frequency in a time that no longer existed, to trap the signal forever. I slammed the corroded battery key into a hidden slot on the console. A jolt of electricity surged through the machine, and the hum, for a moment, became a stable, clear tone. The dials stopped spinning. The static cleared from the screen, revealing a blank green cathode tube. I had a few moments, maybe less. The broadcast's rage was palpable, a cold, focused fury that was a physical weight on my shoulders. I began to turn the dials, setting the year to 74, the month to December, the day to the 31st, the hour to 11, the minutes to 59. As my fingers turned the final dial, setting the minute to 59, the voice from the speakers returned, but this time it was a single, high-pitched shriek of pure, unadulterated terror. The ghostly figures in the broadcast booth became a single, swirling vortex of light and darkness. The hum of the console became a deafening, vibrating roar that shook the very foundations of the bunker. I had found the right frequency. I was about to sever the connection, to lock the broadcast in a moment of its own death. But then, the final dial, the one that controlled the seconds, began to turn on its own. Slowly at first, then faster, skipping past the numbers, defying my control. The broadcast was fighting back. It had one final chance to stop me, one last move to make me a part of its eternal transmission. The ghost in the booth was screaming, silently, its arms outstretched in a final, desperate plea. The voice on the airwaves was a triumphant, terrifying roar, and I knew that my time had run out. I had failed. The seconds dial spun out of control, the numbers a green blur as they raced towards midnight. The broadcast's roar reached its crescendo, a wave of pure psychic energy that slammed into me, knocking me back from the console. The console's lights died, and the room was plunged into total darkness, broken only by the dim, flickering green light from the cathode tube. The screaming from the speakers ceased. The roaring stopped. The oppressive hum of the console was gone. A profound, chilling silence fell over the bunker. I was alone. The broadcast was over, but I didn't feel a sense of relief. I felt a cold dread, a terrifying emptiness in my chest. I had lost. I was the new operator, the new host. I heard a new sound, a faint, rhythmic pulse, coming from the console. I reached out in the darkness, my hand finding a single remaining dial. It was the on-OFF switch. I hadn't turned it off. The broadcast was still running, but it was silent. My heart hammered against my ribs, a cold knot of fear forming in my stomach. The silence was the real horror. It was waiting. Then, from the darkness, from the speakers I couldn't see, a voice, a single calm and terrifyingly clear voice began to speak. It was my voice, my own words, the opening line of my vlog, my narration from the moment I entered the bunker. My name is Ethan, and my obsession with abandoned places has taken me to the darkest corners of forgotten history. ... My recording. The final transmission had found its new voice. It was broadcasting me. My life, my thoughts, my very soul was now part of its eternal signal. The broadcast continued, my recorded words a chilling, alien echo in the dark. But then it began to change. My words were distorted, my voice becoming more pained, more frantic. It was a new recording, a new broadcast, a new final transmission. It was a live broadcast of my own terror. The entity was transmitting my fear, my despair, my last moments of consciousness. The broadcast had no end. It would repeat my final moments, my final fear, for anyone who stumbled upon the bunker and dared to turn the dial. But then I heard it, a single, distinct sound that wasn't part of the broadcast, a faint, low humming. I looked up, and in the dark, I saw the ghost of the operator, his face a silent, sympathetic mask, a faint, translucent form now free from the broadcast. He pointed to my headlamp. It was my only light source, my only connection to the world outside the bunker. It was still running. It wasn't the broadcast. It was me, my mind, my life, my very existence. I was the broadcast. With the last vestiges of my will, I reached for my camera, now cold and silent on the ground. I had to record this. I had to make sure someone else found this place. Someone else had to know what was happening here. But as my fingers closed around the cold metal of the camera, a final, horrifying realization hit me. I wasn't recording this. This was the final transmission. The broadcast was still running, and my consciousness, my soul, my last moments of terror were being transmitted forever. The final transmission was not a ghost story. It was a frequency that was broadcasting me. And for anyone who dared to listen, I was its final, terrifying host.